Ladies and gentlemen, now, without further ado, let's check out this report regarding Egypt building the fourth generation new smart cities, working on being an efficient and sustainable urban communities. And we'll be right back.
Egypt has a very ancient and culturally rich civilization and demonstrates it proudly through the astounding architecture, relics and artifacts that are dotted all over the country. The country has gone through various eras of cultural evolution as it has passed from one set of administrators to another, starting from the rule of pharaohs to Greco-Roman period in 332 BC to the Byzantine period and ultimately the Islamic conquest of Egypt in 624 AD. This makes Egypt an ideal place for cultural tourism as it has no end of attractions and history for tourists to enjoy the traditions of its people that are still a living, breathing reality, which is waiting to be unearthed and experienced. Egypt enjoys various fields of tourism attractions. The most important are archaeological or cultural tourism, which is one of the oldest types of tourism in Egypt. Despite the multiple types of tourism, Egypt's cultural tourism remains unrepeated, unique and non-competitive. Egypt possesses two-thirds of the world's known monuments. Besides cultural and archaeological tourism, many tourism attraction types have come into existence and addressed broader segments of tourists across the world. These include recreational tourism, beaches, religion, therapeutic tourism, ecotourism, sports, golf, safari, desert tourism, as well as maritime tourism. In addition to this, there's festival tourism and cultural events. Diving centers tourism represent a tourist activity that attracts large numbers of tourists. Sharm el-Sheikh city is one of the largest diving centers in the world because of its potential environment and unique diversified nature, which leads Sharm el-Sheikh to be one of the major centers for attracting domestic and international tourism. Time-sharing tourism, which was developed by Egypt, has also revived. This new type of tourism grants non-Egyptians the right of ownership and usage of small units of accommodation in some new urban areas as well as tourist areas in each of the distinguished cities in the Red Sea.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. That was actually a report regarding the cultural tourism here in Egypt, but we'll start our discussion right away. Dr. Masoud, now these national mega projects working on building new cities, be it the administrative capital, the new cities in Alamein, Mansoura, and all of these cities. Now, before we start delving into the smart cities and the sustainable smart cities, now, how do you see the Egyptian economy moving in light of building and embarking on these new cities? Is it cost effective right now? Will it be costly now, but we'll bear the fruit of it later on? How does this work on the Egyptian economy?
First of all, it is when you talk about mega cities, it is very important. As a matter of fact, I can consider it as a part of overall structure reform of economic reform program. What is the connection between that and the economic reform program? Well, the connection is actually, first of all, it has three main aspects. The first aspect is economic side, which is using the optimum use of the resources that are around this area. For instance, when you talk about the Alamein area, it is a very good tourist destination. So it has a huge and a very nice, beautiful sea scene there. So building such city is going to be using and built upon what we call it advantage in that the area have. When you talk about the administrative capital in Egypt, you talk about also has a great and very, very important economic role, not only economic but political role as well. And when you talk about this administrative capital, you are talking about an area that almost like Singapore. It is a huge area that is going to be holding a financial center, is going to holding all these industries, and it is very well connected to the seaport and Safaja area, as well as it is very close to October area and the New Cairo. So we are talking about using the advantage in here in communications and commuting and so on and so on. When you talk about also, for instance, in Asyut area, if you go there in Asyut, and even the same thing in Aswan, it is a very, very crowded cities there, and it is surrounded by desert, and from the other side is the Nile. So you really have to move out people, and they are with their activities, with their economic activities, out of this very crowded city, because it is very costly to live there. It is very costly to have business there. Usually when you talk about all these new cities, you're talking about cities that almost is going to be doubling the accumulated or accommodated areas in Egypt. Is going to be very good in terms of economic base. Most of them have, or not only most of them, all of them, they have economic base, economic sector that is going to actually help this city to grow. Also, it is connected with education.
Yes.
All of the new cities you find, you have a branch of international universities or private universities there. So it is kind of, it has the base or the economic base underneath them.
Yes, definitely. Well, Dr. Qaoud, now we can talk about building new cities, but what about the fourth generation smart cities? What is the aim of building such cities, and what are the main characteristics of such a fourth generation smart city?
Okay, we want to adopt smart technologies in these new cities, because we are facing many challenges in Egypt or all over the world. We are facing a growing population. We are also we want to save energy, so we have to encourage people to reduce the consumption of energy. So it is important to adopt smart technologies in these cities. So when I talk about smart cities and the use of smart technologies, what's the meaning of a smart city? So a city to be smart is to focus the investment in the ICT infrastructures, in a modern transportation network. We talk also about the wise management of resources. These points are so important to the smart cities. And also I can add a very important point here. It's about how to manage a smart city, because my PhD research was to analyze the form of governance that enable to foster the innovation and the entrepreneurship in these cities. So I can recommend the private-public partnership form of governance, because it was one of the main results of my research. Why? Because this form of governance enabled to have governmental bodies and private institutions that foster the development of innovation and entrepreneurship. And we can't separate between a smart city, the concept of the smart city, and the concept of an entrepreneurial hub. We have to see the smart city as an opportunity for entrepreneurship and innovation. So that's the point of a smart city. And when I I talk about smart technologies, it is about using of information and communication technologies and getting insights of collecting data to transform it into smart applications. So that will help us to have to develop new ways of living our day-to-day living,
Yes.
to improve our life. For example, I can give you many examples about smart technologies if you want.
Yes. Well, we will definitely talk about these things. Dr. Masoud, now we're asking the people to leave the main overcrowded cities and move into these new cities. And as Dr. Qaoud mentioned, there will be a lot of heavy use and dependence of technology and ICT, trying to apply and modernize the style of life, the culture of living. What is being done to encourage the citizens of leaving their already sort of comfortable or comfort zones of their own habitats and embarking on new areas, transforming the lifestyle and transforming the dependence of their livelihood into new areas and new cities?
Well, I like the words you said, encourage people to do it. When people move to new communities, usually they have incentive to do that. You cannot force people or just ask people to move to new cities, because they have community there, they have their economic ties there, they have culture aspects and social aspects. So what are the incentives that it is there in the new cities, in smart cities in Egypt, that it will lead the Egyptian to move out of these crowded cities to them? First, the economic base that we were talking about. All of the smart cities in Egypt were built and depending on economic based. Some of them they have industrial zones, some of them financial markets, some of them tourist destinations, and all of this.
Yes.
And all of them they have a new universities and new education institutions and so on and so on. Especially, by the way, especially when you talk about education, usually when you really want to have cities to be really populated by people, usually have a university there. And this has happened in many new cities, in all cities now, the all for sure, in Egypt. For instance, I remember in Asyut, when you built university, people moved there. In Al-Minya Jadida, New Minya, actually, when you build the university there, people moved there. So this is the issue. So education, you talk about economic base, because people, they have jobs there. So it is kind of push and pull factors. Push factors, overcrowded. It is very costly to have business there. When you move to new cities, you have a new infrastructure regarding communication and digitalization in the city, which usually make the cost less effective or less than the traditional. So it is like push and pull factors. Something you push the people from these old unplanned cities, very crowded cities. They don't have a very good education institutions, health institutions, whatever. And you go to the area where you have industrial place, you have commercial, areas, you have very well planned residential areas, recreation. In all new cities we have a huge areas for recreation. So for this reason this is the difference between Marina and New Alamein. New Alamein was Marina was built only just a group of buildings just for people to go there during the summer. But there in a New Alamein, yes, you go there, but there is an economic base. you can settle and you can have your economic activities and you can generate incomes and staying there enjoying the scenery there.
Yes.
So this is about, in conclusion, it has a push and pull factors, both of them encourage and give incentives for people moving from the overcrowded cities into smart and inner cities.
Well, Dr. Qaoud, as Dr. Masoud mentioned, it's about finding some sort of an economic base for the people to go there. Now, how can Egypt encourage and really create an environment to promote the innovation and entrepreneurship? You've mentioned it is a partnership between the public institutions and the private sector as well. But how could that be translated into actual projects, actual ideas? What can the government do to encourage the innovation, to encourage the startups, the entrepreneurship?
First of all, it is very important to develop the city in a very high infrastructures, a modern infrastructure, because this is so important for all the stakeholders that they will cooperate on this ground. So it is also very important to cooperate between the governmental bodies and the universities and the industries. The problem that we find here in some universities, that the students couldn't work for some jobs when they finish their studies. So it is important that the government link between what the students will take in their syllabus and what will work in their, and prepare them for the future job. The students have to be familiar with the new technologies. And also for the governmental bodies, we found that we have a governmental body that is supported by Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, like Center TEEC, that is based in Smart Village. This is a very important center of the only governmental body for innovation and entrepreneurship in Egypt. And he is running training program and the capacity building system for entrepreneurship, and this is very good initiative from the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. So it is important to also link with the initiative that is taken by the government and what is the industry, the private investors also can provide for the country.
Yes.
So we have in these new cities to have an environment that fosters the innovation and entrepreneurship, that have many links between the state, the industry, and the academy. This is a very important point.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Masoud, now, if we want to encourage this sort of innovative mentality and entrepreneurship and starting their own business and getting new ideas, starting their own industries, now, what can the government do? I mean, we've already been talking many times about the government trying to help the SMEs and the startups and giving them loans, but you need much more than that to encourage them even to move outside of their comfort zone, outside of their own homes, outside of their own cities, and link it to actually not just starting a business there, but actually living there. So do you see a plan or a way to encourage people to move to a place, live there, and start their own business? I don't know, giving them more loans, less taxes, cheaper prices for the houses there, for the accommodation. How can the government work in that respect, since being part of a smart city will really focus mainly on the private sector, the entrepreneurship, and the innovative industries?
You touched a very important thing. First of all, it has something related to culture and the people mind-setting and how they think. If we go back to my generation, when we graduated, when we were students in 1990s, you know, at the beginning of 1990s, we were students. All of us, or I can say 99% of us, were thinking about after we graduate, we are waiting for the government to give us, to hire us somewhere. We don't know, we didn't know actually where it is. But anyway, we just waiting for a governmental job. After becoming a professor, and I start to ask, I was very curious and still very curious to ask my students, who from you guys are really want to work for the government, and almost no one actually raised his hand except for people who wants to work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as ambassadors.
Yes.
Only people who wants as ambassador who really wants to work for the government. Otherwise, no one works for why, you know, lots of bureaucratics, small salaries and everything is really ridiculous.
Yes.
Okay, so people in this generation moves toward working in the private sector, but they really want like a safe area. They don't want to take risk. So this is the issue. So that what the government can do is do some steps to reduce risks for young people if they start their own business, so they will move to be entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So it is a matter of reducing risk, not give subsidies. If you remember in my generation also, when the government build the buildings in the desert and accumulate some land and say this is for a newly graduated youth, and no one went there. Well, it is not about giving something free. It's about incentives. People respond to incentives, not to free issues. Free lunch, it is not an incentive. Free lunch, I'm repeating it many times. Free lunch, it is not completely, it is not incentive. So how the government can give incentives for these people? By reducing risk. How can the government reduce risk? First of all, if you go, you have to prepare the infrastructure for the business. You have to improve what we call it a business environment. Okay, if you are moving to install in what we call a new smart cities, then the high tech and communication and commuting and transportation, all this infrastructure, it has to be really done. You cannot move, for instance, there without the infrastructure is completely, you finish the infrastructure. So this is what we do. But we still have this, up until now, you know, even our young people moved from liking and loving, feel in love with a government job to, you know, they don't feel in love so much with the private sector, but this is a better option than the government job. To move them from being entrepreneur, it needs lots of things to do. First, you need to educate them about entrepreneurship. In universities now, we have lots of workshops. In my school, we are going to hold maybe next week workshops. Every week we will have a workshop, a 3-day workshop just for entrepreneurship, just to put the guys in mood of entrepreneurship.
You have to change the culture.
Exactly, you have to change the culture.
Yes.
Then you change the culture. What next? Well, you have to support them financially. Okay, you have technically support them through other institutions like Social Development Fund, which they have new names, you know. Okay, and other institutions. Then you go to a change or reform the legislation infrastructure, laws that related to business encouragement and all this business, and reducing the time frame for getting license and so on and so on. If you do that, then you reduce the risk of having a new business. If you're having your own business, then you completely are going to move people and give them incentive instead of working for some people, some other people, no, to work for themselves.
Yes.
This is the issue.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and now let's check out the report regarding the 4th generation smart cities, trying to be as efficient and sustainably developed as possible. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
oldest type of tourism and the most popular of all. Tourists who are into cultural tourism are fascinated by the history of countries like Egypt. Egypt is one of the most important global tourist destinations in 2020. This was announced by Adventures by Disney Touring Company, which has selected Egypt as one of the most important destinations. It offers a 10-day trip including 5 locations and 22 sites in Egypt, from Cairo to Aswan to Luxor, then Sharm el-Sheikh. The tour will include visits to breathtaking places like the pyramids, the Sphinx, Saladin Citadel, the Great Mosque of Muhammad Ali, the Grand Egyptian Museum and Khan el-Khalili Market, as well as Edfu and Luxor temples. The program includes a 3-night river cruise and cultural activities like an Egyptian cooking class, Nubian folkloric show and henna tattoo experience. The Grand Egyptian Museum is going to open in the 4th quarter of 2020. It is a clear testament that Egypt has a lot of heritage and a lot of antiquities to show the world. The museum is going to revive cultural tourism again, not just to Egypt, but globally. Egypt is famous for its amazing sights and activities. There are many sound and light shows held across Egypt, including at Abu Simbel, the citadels of Cairo and Taba, as well as the pyramids and Luxor. The shows are an amazing spectacle that tell the story of Egypt using the latest multimedia.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Qaoud, now, we were talking about the 4th generation smart cities, and we're also talking about the sustainable smart city. Egypt has its own plan of 2030 for achieving sustainable development. Same thing with the whole African continent, 2063. Now, is there a difference between the let's call it the traditional smart city and the sustainable development, a sustainable smart city? Is it a question of saving energy, saving time? What is the definition of a sustainable smart city?
A smart city has to develop an environmental perspective. It is very important. We have to encourage people to save energy. Okay, so in a smart city we have to develop smart technologies that enable and smart solutions to help people to reduce energy and reduce also the consumption of water. So when you talk about a smart city, you have to talk about that the investment in the ICT infrastructure or the investment in the public transportation and so on have to foster a sustainable economic growth. So this is so important point in the definition of a smart city. I can give you some examples for
yes,
using
please,
smart technologies in these new cities to save energy. For example, the lighting system. For example, when someone in a corridor, a sensor can detect that someone will pass by this corridor, so the lighting picks up. And when he passes, so the lighting dims again. So he reduces energy. In all, we will have also smart applications of home energy management system. That means that, for example, when you are not home, the sensor can automatically turn off your devices. So you save energy also. For a smart technology also in your phone, you can have also for the public transportation. I was living in a smart city in France, so we have, for example, a message that telling us that the bus that is coming is crowded, so you can take other. You can go work by walk or wait for another bus. And also what is important with the environmental perspective of a smart city, that we have to encourage people to use, for example, their bicycle to go to work by walk,
Yes.
to avoid also of using the car in a daily basis.
Yes.
Also, there is a very smart technology that is important abroad. I think in Egypt also it could be applied for elderly people. For example, some elderly people are living alone in their home, and we don't know if we can have a sensor in their home that detect their movement.
Yes.
So it learns a pattern of their movement, and when this pattern become irregular, so the sensor can alert, for example, the neighbor to knock the door, or for example, to call someone of their family member to call the emergency.
Yes.
This is also a very important smart technology
Yes.
that can be applied here in Egypt.
Yes.
These examples, for example, of smart technologies is very important and are very important.
Yes.
But it's all these technologies are based on collecting data.
Yes,
This is
most
very
definitely.
important.
Yes. Well, Dr. Masoud, now both of you highlighted the importance of having a very high standard infrastructure, talking about applying all these facilities, all this technology, having this sort of base for the citizens to go and live there. Now, all these things cost a lot of money.
Yes.
Now, how can you encourage the citizens to go and live there and make such an opportunity, all these services being there affordably, at affordable prices, for all the citizens to move to these new cities instead of having all these cities there but extremely expensive, so it wouldn't include most of the Egyptian population?
Yes, well, I give you a very simple example. Yes, the bicycle is cheaper than a car.
Yes.
Yes, but it is the car is faster than a bicycle, which is going to save you money. So if you are moving into new cities, smart cities, that it has a very, very good infrastructure and high-tech infrastructure and all of that, yes, it could be costly, yes, but it could also, it should reducing the cost actually of doing business, the cost of doing work, and the cost of whatever. So overall, in terms of cost and benefit analysis, you are going to find it is better than the traditional one.
Yes.
It is about a cost and benefit analysis.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely these new fourth generation sustainable smart cities, definitely these step forward for the Egyptian population in general, and still a lot of work to be done on our part as well. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Ali Masoud, the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Political Science at Beni Suef University. I'd also like to thank Dr. Hebatallah, the Professor of Management Sciences at Nantes University in France, specialized in innovation and entrepreneurship. Thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.